What would you do if the people who tucked you in at night, packed your school lunch, and told you every single day that honesty is the only thing that truly matters, turned out to be planning to steal an old man's entire world right out from under him? Stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that will keep you awake at 3 in the morning, questioning everything you thought you knew about family, loyalty, and just how far desperate people will go when they believe no one is watching. My name is Sophie Harlan. I'm 29 years old. I teach music at a middle school in Brooklyn, New York. And 3 years ago, I watched my own parents, two people I loved completely, attempt one of the most calculated, cold-blooded acts of fraud I have ever witnessed in my life. Their target was my grandfather, a 77-year-old self-made man named Walter Harlan, who built everything he owned from absolutely nothing, with nothing but his own 2 hands and 40 years of stubborn, relentless work. The prize they were after was a $9 million penthouse in Upper Manhattan. And their plan to take it was ruthless, sophisticated, and almost perfectly executed. Almost. Welcome to Whispers of Wisdom, where real stories about real people remind us who we truly are. My grandfather Walter Harlan arrived in New York City from rural Scotland when he was 22 years old, carrying a single duffel bag and roughly $300 in crumpled bills. He had no college degree, no connections, no family here, just a refusal to go back home and admit defeat. He started as a warehouse loader in the Bronx, stacking boxes 10 hours a day 6 days a week, eating canned soup, saving every cent, and within 3 years had worked his way up to warehouse manager. Within 10 years, he borrowed enough to start his own small freight and logistics company out of a single garage in Queens with 2 second-hand trucks. He spent the next 3 decades building that into something remarkable: over 40 employees, a fleet of 32 vehicles, revenues pushing well past 8 figures. In 2005, he purchased a penthouse on the 34th floor of a luxury building on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, 3 bedrooms, a private library, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, bookshelves stretching from floor to ceiling filled with Scottish history and biographies, and a collection of antique clocks ticking quietly throughout every room. This was not just a home. For Walter, it was proof that a boy from a small Scottish town with nothing but determination could build something real in this vast and indifferent city. My grandmother passed away 7 years ago, and since then Walter had lived alone, sharp and engaged, managing his own investments, reading 3 newspapers every morning, and calling me every Sunday at noon, always on time, always starting the same way: "Sophie, my girl, tell me something worth knowing." I adored him completely. My parents, Daniel and Patricia Harlan, lived a comfortable modest life in Hoboken, New Jersey, Dad a financial analyst, Mom in corporate HR, combined income around $130,000 a year, enough for a townhouse with a manageable mortgage, 2 reliable cars, and a week somewhere warm every February. Growing up we weren't flashy, but we were happy, or at least I believed we were. My parents had a respectful but distant relationship with Walter: Thanksgiving, Christmas, polite conversation, then back to their separate lives, and in 29 years I never once suspected either of them was capable of what came next. Then Dad lost his job. His firm collapsed suddenly. A major client fraud case brought down the whole structure, and 47 employees were let go on a Tuesday afternoon by automated email. No severance, no warning. Dad was 54. Within 6 weeks it was clear that finding comparable work at his age would be far harder than either of them admitted. The mortgage kept arriving. Their savings disappeared. By month 4, the word foreclosure had moved from an abstract fear to a real document sitting on their kitchen table. It was a rainy evening in early March when my parents called me over for a family conversation. I walked in to find them at the dining table with a laptop and papers everywhere. Dad slid a printed spreadsheet toward me: income, expenses, debt, and the final number in the bottom right corner was circled in red. They were running a monthly deficit of nearly $5,000 with roughly 60 days before the bank moved forward. Then Dad said they had a solution. They wanted to move into Walter's penthouse, and Dad claimed Walter had already agreed, saying he was lonely and would love the company. It sounded reasonable on its surface, but as Dad kept talking he said something that made my stomach drop: "And honestly, Sophie, if we take good care of him and he's grateful, well, he's 77. He'll want to take care of us eventually. It only makes sense." In 29 years I had never once heard either of my parents mention Walter's estate. It landed wrong the way a note played slightly off-key lands wrong. You feel it before you can name it. I drove home with a crawling unease I couldn't shake. My parents moved into the penthouse 6 weeks later, and at first it seemed to be working. Walter called me the first week sounding cheerful, saying it was good to have voices in the place. But when I visited 3 weeks later, things felt different. The hallway had been repainted stark white. Walter's beloved Dublin Street map print was gone, replaced by a large abstract canvas in charcoal and rust that felt completely wrong in the space. The living room had been rearranged, and his old burgundy leather reading chair, owned for 30 years, had been shoved into the hallway corner. When I found Walter in his library, he looked rested on the surface, but underneath I could see something else: exhaustion, the particular tiredness that isn't about sleep. I told him he could ask them to stop, and he said simply, "Richard is my son. They're struggling. I don't want to be the man who kicks someone when they're already down." Then he added quietly, "But I'm watching. I'm paying attention." 3 weeks later he called at 11:47 at night. He pointed to the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk and explained that he kept a small sliver of card positioned at the upper right corner of the drawer interior, a habit from his business days, and that if the drawer was opened the card would move. That afternoon the card had shifted and the documents inside bore fingerprints that were not his. He told me he had also noticed Daniel asking very specific questions over recent weeks, about how the apartment was titled, whether the trust was revocable, what his health directives contained. "These are not the questions of a son asking out of natural concern," he said. "These are the questions of someone mapping a path." He asked me to visit more often, watch and listen, and say nothing of what he'd told me. Over the following 3 weeks I visited twice a week and kept my eyes wide open. One afternoon I passed the study and heard Dad's voice on the phone, "Right, but if the owner is elderly and can be demonstrated to have cognitive decline, who initiates the conservatorship process? Does it have to go through the courts? What if family members are providing full-time care?" I stood frozen in the hallway, heart hammering. Another morning I arrived unannounced to find Mom in the library, scanner running, feeding Walter's private documents through it. She claimed he had asked her to digitize his files. I asked Walter later. He had asked no such thing. The piece that truly terrified me came on a Tuesday afternoon when I spotted a handwritten note in Mom's handwriting tucked under a notepad on the kitchen counter. "Attorney confirmed, medical incapacity filing plus POA transfer. Needs signed evaluation, Dr. K has agreed. Timeline, while subject is abroad. Do not use home printer." I photographed it immediately with shaking hands and sent it to Walter that evening. He called back within 20 minutes, his voice completely composed, "Sophie, it's time for me to go away for a while." 5 days later at a family dinner Walter announced he was going abroad, an extended trip, Scotland mostly, perhaps France and Portugal, visiting an old friend who had been asking for years. He said he'd be gone perhaps 3 months. I watched my parents' faces across the table and saw something pass between them, wordless and electric, that I felt rather than saw. 2 days later Dad drove Walter to JFK and came back looking lighter than I'd seen him in months. That evening through the wall I heard my parents talking, Mom's voice saying 3 months is more than enough, the attorney is ready, the evaluation is ready, and Dad asking nervously about the signature, and Mom telling him to just trust the process. I sat in the dark completely still and pressed record on my phone. New York State is a one-party consent state, any party to a conversation may legally record it, and I was present. What my parents did not know was that Walter had never boarded that plane. He had rented a small furnished studio apartment 11 blocks from the Penthouse paid in cash, and with him was a man named Raymond Cross, a former NYPD financial crimes detective who now ran his own private investigation firm, and together they began building something my parents never saw coming. Walter called me from the studio, "Sophie, I need you to keep visiting, keep acting normal, keep recording when you can. I've been building things for 50 years. I know how to be patient." Over the following 11 weeks Raymond surveilled my parents every single day. He followed Dad to a midtown law office and documented 3 separate visits, consultations about property transfer, elderly owner, capacity questions. He traced Mom's meetings with a document preparation specialist at an East Village coffee shop and made